Hello viewers, I'm going to take a different approach in this video. This video I'm going to focus on props on the layout instead of the trains or accessories. Specifically, I'm going to take a look at vehicles and people. First of all, I want to reiterate something about model train layouts that I briefly mentioned in a few previous videos. My philosophy towards layouts is that each of us is creating our own little world as we build our layouts, so we can each make our own rules relating to that little world. If you want a layout that's as realistic and true to scale as possible, and you have the know-how and resources to do that, then great, go for it. If you want to create some total fantasy world, then do that. There are, of course, many options in between. I built my first layout for my dad's American Flyer trains when I was in college in the 1970s. Unfortunately, this low-quality picture is the only one I have of it. The only references I had back then were magazines like S-Gagian and some very elaborate layouts built by model train clubs. Since I couldn't come close to matching the layouts that I saw in these resources, I felt my layout was nice, but still extremely inadequate. It took quite a few years for me to realize that that assessment wasn't true, and I was being too hard on myself. I hope I can now help others avoid that same trap. In my case, I want something that has a certain degree of realism, but I don't obsess over it. My primary layout is set in the 1950s, so I use props that reflect that era, but I'm willing to be a bit flexible regarding this. Also, since I'm not able to keep my primary layout up all the time, I'll sometimes put together a small temporary layout, such as this Western theme, which I'm still collecting characters and other props for. This Christmas layout, which I featured in several previous videos, and in which I definitely take many liberties with scale. Or perhaps a simple rural theme like this layout that uses my American Flyer trains for the 1920s and 30s, when American Flyer was still 3-rail, O-gauge, 1/48 scale. All of these layouts are very simplistic, but they are just temporary, and sometimes simplicity can have its own charm. As another example, my young granddaughter likes to sometimes put up a small layout that features the Polly Pocket toys that we still have from when our daughters were that age. She uses this simple layout in some very imaginative ways. These examples are my way of saying, do what you enjoy and what has meaning to you. Now I'm going to focus on scale. Until recently, I used a lot of 1/48 scale vehicles on my layout. Of course, this is Lionel scale. One viewer even commented on that. At that time, that's what I seemed to have a lot of access to. I realize that Matchbox and Hot Wheels are 1/64 scale, but Hot Wheels vehicles tend to be hot rods and sporty vehicles that don't fit into my theme. Matchbox has some vehicles that fit my 1950s theme, but I haven't seen any in local stores and haven't ordered any yet. Of course, there are now some other companies that manufacture 1/64 scale vehicles, and I sometimes find a few in antique stores. 3D printing is also an option, so I am managing to put together a pretty decent collection of 1/64 scale vehicles and farm equipment, including an Ertl farm. I found that many Ertl products are 1/64 scale, and I grew up on a farm, so I like using Ertl when I can. So I could go with predominantly 1/64 scale vehicles, and we'll probably get some more, but at this time, I still don't have enough to fill the layout, and a great majority of my people are 1/48 scale. So I found what for me are good compromises, keeping in mind that personal preference and sentimental value can also be factors. Let's look at some more vehicles. These are Plasticville vehicles. I have at least 10 Plasticville structures on my layout. They're considered to be 1/48 scale, so I assume the vehicles are too. These vehicles are very simplistic, but as I mentioned earlier, in a way that can add to their charm. The vehicles in this picture are all Auburns from the 1950s and 60s. I played with a lot of Auburn toys when I was a child, so these have some sentimental value to me. Unfortunately, none of these were mine as a child. I wish I knew what happened to those, but I still enjoy using these. I don't know what scale these are, but they are close to 1/48 scale. The fire truck is relatively smaller than the others, therefore a different scale, but it still suits my need. The vehicles and the blimp in this picture are obviously a variety of scales, but I enjoy using all of them for specific purposes. You'll see them used in later pictures. The gas truck in this picture is Tootsie Toy. I also have a yellow version of this truck. As with Auburn, Tootsie Toy was very popular when I was a kid. The other two vehicles are Man-Oil. These are the type of vehicles that are used with the American Flyer 715 action car. I believe they're 1/48 scale, so since the Tootsie Toy gas truck is relatively smaller, I think it might be close to 1/64 scale. Regarding the use of Man-Oil vehicles, it's not unusual for American Flyer accessory items to be out of scale. For example, the black and white Holstein in the middle of this trio of cows is 1/64 scale from an Ertl farm set. The cow in front, which goes with the American Flyer stockyard, is considerably smaller, especially if you take it off of the base. And the cow in the back, that goes with the American Flyer cow on track accessory, is definitely way too large. The people that go with the Gilbert station are actually very close to 1/64 scale, but the men on the hand car are also too large. These are only a few examples of how American Flyer designers could be very particular about making true-to-scale engines and rolling stock, but they weren't as particular when it came to accessories, although there were probably some very good reasons for that in some cases. I have people from a variety of sources. Many people, such as most of the people in this station scene, are from Walthers or other similar vendors. The people in this picture are Plasticville, so they're 1/48 scale and are designed to go with Plasticville buildings and vehicles. This set of people is Mark's. They came from airport and gas station sets that I had as a kid. Originally, they were all yellow, like these figures. Some have been painted by an art teacher that I used to work with, and some by one of my son-in-laws. I've seen videos and pictures that showed some of these same characters being used on other layouts, so I mustn't be the only one that had Mark's sets as a child and decided to use parts of them on a train layout as an adult. The Plasticville and Mark's people are all basically 1/48 scale, so they work well together. These musicians are slightly larger than 1/48 scale, but they work well in this scene, so I don't worry about it. Almost all of my 1/64 scale people came with Ertl farm and county fair sets that I have. This picture shows you the difference between people of the two scales. I suppose I could invest in more 1/64 scale people, but there are several reasons for me not doing that. First of all, I'm not sure I could get the same variety in 1/64 scale as I have in 1/48 scale. Secondly, I'm not sure it's worth the expense at this time in my life. And finally, I like the way I've managed to combine the various scales in the layout. This picture shows 1/64 scale people next to 1/48 scale vehicles in the back, and the opposite arrangement in the front. Props in the two scales might look a bit awkward when they're right next to each other, but I still think they can be used in the same layout. Let me show you some pictures from my layout so you can see how I use various scales. Maybe you like my examples and maybe you won't, but either way, I like it, so that's what counts. These workers are 1/48 scale. I made the generators they're working on from dish soap bottle lids, so they don't really have a scale, but to me they seem to fit. The characters in this farmer's market scene are 1/48 scale. The scene combines Mark's characters with some modern characters. Plasticville cars are in the parking area, but the pickup truck with produce in is 1/64 scale. In this scene, the car salesman with the square base, the man changing the tire, and the man who is sweeping on the sawmill accessory are all Marks. I believe all three are from the gas station. There's a lot to mention in this picture. The two trucks and the fire truck are all Auburn. The gas truck is Tootsie Toy. The fire station, church, and Brown control tower are all Plasticville, as are the two people in front of the church. The motorcycle cop driving past the fire station is Marks. In the distance are 1/48 scale welders. The trolley car is out of scale, but I think it's cool, so I blend it in. The Dalmatians by the fire station are actually from a Disney 101 Dalmatians playset. They might be slightly large, but I think they're really close enough, and they provide a fun touch. It's amazing where you can find useful props, so keep your eyes open. These buildings are all Plasticville, as are most of the people. This is a 1/48 scale Plasticville house, fence, and trees, but I'm using 1/64 scale people and vehicles with it. I think it works fine. Everything in this farm scene is 1/64 scale, mostly Ertl. But on the other end of the same shelf, the workers in the vegetable garden are 1/48 scale. I feel they blend together nicely. This is a Plasticville diner and Department 56 sports bar. Both are 1/48 scale, but I'm using 1/64 scale vehicles in the parking lots. Vehicles of other scales are on the street. You might also notice how out of scale the American Flyer crossing sign is. Another anomaly on the layout is that I used the upper loop for my pre-World War II trains. The engine by the station was manufactured in 1926, and the steam engine was manufactured in 1932. The rolling stock would be from the 20s and 30s. As mentioned earlier, during these years, American Flyer was made in 1/48 scale. 1/64 scale, two-rail American Flyer wasn't introduced until immediately after World War II. There's a Marx engine and a few passenger cars in the background. And then there's the real, what you might call the elephant on the layout, the flywheel. It's made from an A.C. Gilbert erector set that belonged to my dad. So it not only matches an A.C. Gilbert theme on the layout, but it also has a lot of sentimental value, even though it's immensely out of scale. Finally, there's this Superman. It's oversized, but he's protecting the entire make-believe world, so that's okay. So I'm satisfied with how the mix of various scales works. In fact, in some cases, the difference in scale can add perspective to the scene. I do have a few 3D printed items, but haven't gotten into that too much yet. I also didn't talk about buildings. Since most of my buildings are Plasticville, then using 1/48 scale people around those buildings works best, although I did make an exception with that cottage. Buildings could be a whole second video, so I won't say anything more about that now. So those are my thoughts about scale and examples of how I put different scales to use. I really enjoy looking at pictures and videos of other hobbyists' layouts to see how they use props and scenery and have gotten some good ideas from them. I hope you found an idea or two from this video, or from some of my other videos that you can use. So, in closing, I hope you enjoy creating your own world. I hope you enjoy your trains, and thanks for watching.